In the spring of 2009, just weeks before the world would lose him forever, Michael Jackson did something he had never done before. He gathered his three children, Prince, Paris, and Blanket, in a dimly lit room in their Los Angeles home and asked them to sit down. What he said next left them frozen in silence. It wasn't a bedtime story. It wasn't a song. It was an apology, raw, broken, and unexpected. But the confession that followed was something none of them could have prepared for. This is the untold story of a father's last attempt to make peace with the ones he loved most, and the secret he carried for years. What Michael Jackson revealed that night would change everything his children believed about him and themselves. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss our emotional stories about Michael Jackson. The mansion on Carrollwood Drive was quieter than usual, the kind of silence that settles when something heavy hangs in the air. Michael Jackson stood by the window of his rented home, watching the sun dip behind the hills, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. His reflection stared back at him, gaunt, tired, older than his 50 years suggested. The weight of 1,000 expectations pressed against his chest. In another room, his three children played together. Prince, 12 years old, with a seriousness beyond his years. Paris, 11, fierce and curious, her laughter echoing through the halls. And Blanket, just 7, still wrapped in the innocence his father fought so desperately to protect. They were his entire world, his reason for breathing, his redemption. But Michael hadn't been himself lately. The This Is It rehearsals had consumed him, body and soul. He would return home late, exhausted, sometimes unable to eat. His makeup artist Karen Fay had noticed a change. Emotionally frail and physically thin, she would later describe him, very stoic but frightened. The world saw the king of pop preparing for his greatest comeback. His children saw something else. They saw their father slipping away. That evening, Michael made a decision. He couldn't continue carrying this burden alone. The secrets, the fears, the regrets that had haunted him since before his children were born. Michael Jackson was not only known as the king of pop, but the late icon was also a father of 3 children whom he deeply loved. In 2005, he had said his children mean everything to him. "I enjoy taking care of my children myself," he said. "It's fun. That's why I had them." But tonight, fun wasn't on his mind. Tonight was about truth. He walked slowly toward the living room, his footsteps barely audible on the hardwood floors. The children looked up as he entered. Prince noticed something different in his father's eyes, a vulnerability he had rarely seen. Paris stopped mid-sentence, sensing the shift in energy. Even Blanket, usually absorbed in his own imagination, turned his attention fully to his father. "I need to talk to you," Michael said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "All of you. It's important." The children exchanged glances. Their father was many things. Playful, protective, sometimes distant, but never this serious, never this fragile. Michael gestured for them to sit on the couch, and he lowered himself onto the floor in front of them, his knees creaking with the effort. He wanted to look up at them, to be at their level, to be seen not as a king of pop, but simply as their father. "There are things I've never told you," he began, his hands trembling slightly. "Things about my life, about the choices I've made, about why things are the way they are." Prince leaned forward, his protective instincts kicking in. Paris reached for her father's hand, her small fingers intertwining with his. Blanket simply watched, his eyes wide and trusting. Michael took a deep breath, and for the first time in his life, he prepared to open a door he had kept locked for decades. But what he didn't know was that this conversation would be remembered long after he was gone, and that his children would carry his words with them forever. The room felt smaller somehow, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to listen. Michael's voice trembled as he searched for the right words. How do you explain a lifetime of pain to the ones you love most? How do you confess to children that their father, their hero, was also deeply broken? "You know how people always talk about Daddy," Michael began, his eyes lowering. "The magazines, the television, they say things, terrible things, things that have hurt me more than any of you will ever know." Paris squeezed his hand tighter. She had heard the whispers at school, the cruel jokes, the mocking imitations. During her childhood, she and her siblings often wore masks during public outings with their father to hide their faces from the public and press. She never fully understood why until she was older. But even then, even with the masks and the secrecy, the world found ways to wound them. I tried to protect you, Michael continued, from everything, from everyone. He had told media when Prince was born, I grew up in a fishbowl and will not allow the same to happen to my child. He paused, gathering his thoughts. The children waited, their hearts suspended in the silence. But I couldn't protect you from me, from the life I gave you, from the circus that follows everywhere I go. His voice cracked, and for that, I am sorry. The words hung in the air like smoke. Prince felt his chest tighten. He had never heard his father apologize. Not like this. Not with such rawness. Michael Jackson, the man who had performed before millions, who had changed the face of music, who had seemed invincible on stage, was sitting before them, broken. I was thinking about my own children, Prince and Paris, Michael had once said, and how I wanted them to think of me when they grow up. I would like them to remember how I always wanted them with me wherever I went, how I always tried to put them before everything else. But tonight, he wasn't sure that was enough. Because my kids are stalked by paparazzi. They can't always go to a park or a movie with me. So what if they grow older and resent me, and how my choices impacted their youth? Why weren't we given an average childhood like all the other kids? They might ask. The fear had consumed him for years. The fear that one day his children would wake up and realize that being Michael Jackson's child came at a price too high to pay. Paris was the first to respond. Her voice, still young but fierce, cut through the silence. Daddy, we don't care about any of that. We love you. We've always loved you. Michael looked up, tears welling in his eyes. He reached for her face, cupping her cheek in his palm. I know, baby. I know. But there's more. Something I've never told anyone. Something I need you to understand before. He stopped himself, swallowing hard. Prince leaned closer. Before what, Dad? Michael's gaze drifted to the window, to the darkness gathering outside. The This Is It tour was supposed to be his redemption, his final chance to prove to the world, and to himself, that he still had what it took. As he prepared for his 50-show comeback tour, Jackson was battling an addiction prescription drugs, riddled with self-doubt and deeply in debt. But deep down, somewhere in the shadows of his heart, Michael wondered if he would ever make it to that stage. And if he didn't, there were things his children needed to know. Before I go away for a while, he said carefully, choosing his words like stepping stones across a dangerous river. The tour, London, I'll be gone for months. And I need you to understand something first. He pulled all three children closer, wrapping his arms around them as if trying to memorize the feeling. There's something about Daddy's past. Something that shaped everything I am. Everything I've done. And everything I'm afraid of. The room seemed to shift, as if time itself had begun to fold. Michael's eyes glazed over, transported back to a place he rarely spoke of, Gary, Indiana, a small house on Jackson Street, 5 brothers sharing beds, a father whose love came wrapped in discipline so harsh it left scars no one could see. When I was a boy, Michael began, his voice distant, I wasn't allowed to be a child. Not really. I was working, always working, rehearsing, performing. Daddy, your grandfather, he made sure of that. The children listened in silence. They had heard stories about Joe Jackson, of course, but never from their father's lips, never with this much pain. The Jackson 5 sometimes performed in strip clubs early on, with little Michael scurrying around the floor to pick up coins tossed at the boys as tips. At home, Joe literally whipped him into shape during rehearsals, something for which he refuses to apologize for to this day. I got a lot of whipping myself when I was a kid, Joe had told interviewers, offering a favorite excuse. Michael had never forgotten those nights. The belt coming down, the shouting, the fear that lived in his stomach like a permanent resident. But there was something else, something he had buried even deeper. I promised myself, Michael continued, his voice breaking, that if I ever had children of my own, I would never, never treat them the way I was treated. I would give them everything I never had. Love without conditions. Freedom to play. Safety. He looked at each of them in turn. Prince, who had inherited his quiet intensity. Paris, who had his fire and rebellion. Blanket, who had his gentleness and wonder. He was a great father, those close to him would later say. People don't realize much of the time he didn't even have a nanny. He was a single father. He'd make them breakfast, talk to them, take them out to see shows, let them watch him work. It was amazing to witness how enamored Michael was with his children. He changed their diapers through the night, sang and played with them, rocked them to sleep, bathed them, and had to change his own outfits when they threw up on him. But here's what I'm sorry for, Michael said, tears streaming down his face now. I was so afraid of becoming my father that I made different mistakes. I hid you from the world. I kept you inside. I put masks on your faces because I thought I was protecting you. But maybe I was just protecting myself. Maybe I was so scared of the world hurting you the way it hurt me that I forgot to let you live. Paris shook her head fiercely. No, Daddy, you did protect us. You gave us everything. But Michael wasn't finished. There was more, a confession that sat at the very core of his being, something he had never spoken aloud to anyone, not his mother, not his brothers, not even to himself in the quiet hours of the night. There's something else, he whispered, something I've been carrying for so long, and I need you to hear it from me, not from anyone else, not from the television, from me. The children held their breath. The world outside continued spinning, oblivious of the moment unfolding in that dimly lit room. Michael Jackson, the most famous man on the planet, was about to share his deepest secret with the only people who truly mattered. And what he said next would change everything. The silence stretched like a held breath. Michael's hands trembled as he gathered the courage to speak the words he had locked away for decades. His children watched him with a mixture of love and fear. Fear not of him, but for him. They had never seen their father so exposed. When I was your age, Prince, Michael began, his voice barely audible, I didn't know who I was. I looked in the mirror, and I didn't recognize the person staring back. The world told me I was special, that I was destined for greatness. But inside I felt like nothing. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. I've spent my whole life trying to fill that emptiness. With music, with success, with Neverland, with everything money could buy. But none of it worked. None of it ever made me feel enough. When asked why he developed Neverland, Michael had explained, because I wanted to have a place that I could create everything that I never had as a child. So you see rides, you see animals, there's a movie theater. I was always on tour, traveling, and I never got a chance to do those things. Paris squeezed her father's hand tighter. She understood more than he realized. Even at 11, she had sensed a loneliness that lived beneath his smile, the way he would stare out windows for hours, the sadness in his voice when he sang certain songs. But then, Michael continued, his eyes brightening for just a moment, you came along, all three of you, and for the first time in my life, I felt whole. You gave me a purpose, a reason to wake up every morning. They're the world for me. I wake up, and I'm ready for the day because of them. He pulled them closer, his thin arms wrapping around them like a shelter. But here's my confession, the thing I've been too ashamed to admit. His voice dropped to a whisper. I'm afraid, terrified, not of death, not of failure. I'm afraid that I haven't done enough, that when I'm gone, you won't have me anymore. And I've spent so much time working, rehearsing, preparing for this tour, that I've stolen time from you, time I can never get back. The words hit like a thunderclap. Prince felt tears burning behind his eyes. His father, the strongest man he knew, was confessing weakness, confessing fear, confessing regret. I wanted to give you everything, Michael continued. But maybe the thing you needed most was just me, present, here, not in the studio, not on stage, just here. When we were growing up, my father would say, we could have nothing, but you look around in this room, your brother, your sister, and me, that's all you'll ever have. Prince would later share. And that always stuck with my siblings and I. On this night, Michael was giving them those same words in a different form. He was telling them that family, their bond, was everything. That no matter what happened, they would always have each other. But there was one more truth waiting to be spoken. One final revelation that would explain everything. The masks, the isolation, the desperate need to protect them from a world he never trusted. "The reason I hid you," Michael said, his voice breaking completely now, "the reason I covered your faces, kept you inside, built walls around our life. It wasn't just about the paparazzi. It wasn't just about privacy." He took a shuddering breath. "It was because I was terrified that someday someone would take you from me. The way my childhood was taken from me. The way my innocence was stolen. The way the world tried to destroy me." The confession hung in the air, raw and bleeding. "I couldn't survive losing you. Any of you. You are my heart walking outside my body. And if anything ever happened to you because of who I am..." He couldn't finish the sentence. Paris threw her arms around her father's neck, sobbing. "You'll never lose us, Daddy. Never." And in that moment, something shifted. The walls came down. The masks fell away. For the first time, the Jackson family wasn't hiding from the world. They were holding on to each other. The tears had dried, but the air in the room still felt heavy with emotion. Michael pulled back slightly, looking at each of his children with an intensity that would stay with them forever. This was no longer the king of pop. This was simply a father, stripped of his crown, speaking from the deepest chambers of his heart. "I need you to promise me something," Michael said, his voice steadier now, though still fragile. "All three of you." The children nodded, their eyes fixed on their father's face. "Promise me that no matter what happens, no matter what the world says about me, no matter what stories they tell, you will remember this moment. Remember who I am, not the headlines, not the scandals, not the rumors. Me, your father, the man who loved you more than life itself." Prince was the first to speak. His voice, usually so measured and controlled, cracked with emotion. "We know who you are, Dad. We've always known. My siblings and I, we each kind of got a piece of him in different ways." Prince would later tell the world. "For me, it's that philanthropic kind of giving back, and that's where I'm really passionate about. I just hope the work that we do makes him proud." But on this night, the future was unknown. Prince was just a boy, sitting at his father's feet, making a promise he didn't fully understand. A promise to carry a legacy. A promise to protect a memory. Paris wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "We promise, Daddy. We'll always remember." Michael smiled, a real smile, the kind that lit up his entire face. It was a smile his children knew, the one reserved just for them, the one the cameras never captured. "There's something else," Michael said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small, worn photograph. The children leaned in to see. It was a picture of Michael as a young boy, perhaps 9 or 10 years old, standing on stage with his brothers, the Jackson Five. His eyes in the photograph were wide, uncertain, almost afraid. "This is who I was," Michael said softly, "before the world changed me, before the surgeries and the scandals and the fame that swallowed everything. This little boy never got to be a child, but he never stopped dreaming of a family, of children who would love him for who he really was." He handed the photograph to Prince. "Keep this. Look at it whenever you miss me. And remember, I was never the monster they tried to make me. I was just that little boy, lost, trying to find my way home. I get pretty emotional when I see them having a wonderful time." Michael had once said, "When they're on a ride and they're screaming, and they are happy and they are running, it makes me emotional, because I see they're having a real good time." He had given them the childhood he never had, the joy, the freedom, the safety, and now he was giving them something else, the truth. Blanket, who had been quiet throughout the conversation, finally spoke. His voice was small but clear. "Daddy, are you going away?" The question pierced Michael's heart. He knelt down, bringing himself to Blanket's eye level. "I have to go to London soon, baby, for the concerts, but I'll come back. I'll always come back for you. It was a promise he desperately wanted to keep, a promise that fate would cruelly deny. Paris would later recall her father's last words to her during an argument with Prince. "Stop fighting with your brother. I'm not always going to be here, and you're going to have to be the lady and watch over them." The words would haunt her forever, a father's final instruction, a prophecy none of them saw coming. The days that followed the confession were different. There was a new tenderness in the household, a fragility that everyone felt but no one acknowledged. Michael continued his rehearsals, pushing his body to its limits, but his heart was with his children. Every moment at home became precious. Every laugh, every hug, every bedtime story. Paris would later describe those final days to her Aunt LaToya. "Daddy was always cold," she said. "Daddy was always freezing. He would sit and fall asleep by the fireplace. He would always cry, and we would watch to make sure everything was fine. And he needed a doctor, and then they turned the lights out. We were in the dark, and they cut the phones off. The children didn't understand everything that was happening. They didn't know about the mounting pressure from AEG, the financial strain, the medication that was slowly stealing their father's strength. But they sensed it. Children always do." Michael tried to maintain normalcy. He played hide and seek with them, his favorite game. He would later say, "I want to always be youthful and have the energy to run around and play hide and seek, which is one of my favorite games." He watched movies with them, cuddling on the couch until they fell asleep against his shoulder. He sang to them, softly, privately, songs the world would never hear. But there were moments when the mask slipped, moments when the children would catch their father staring into the distance, lost in thoughts they couldn't reach. Moments when his eyes held a sadness so deep it seemed bottomless. One evening, Paris found her father sitting alone in the music room, tears streaming silently down his face. She approached slowly, unsure whether to interrupt. "Daddy, are you okay?" Michael quickly wiped his eyes and forced a smile. "I'm fine, baby. Just thinking." "About what?" He paused, considering how much to share. "About how lucky I am. To have you. All of you. Sometimes I forget to appreciate the moments. And then I remember, and it's overwhelming." Paris sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. "I get sad sometimes too, Daddy. It's okay to cry." Michael laughed softly, a genuine, unguarded laugh. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from you." He kissed the top of her head, holding her close. In that moment, the weight of the world seemed to lift just slightly. He wasn't Michael Jackson, the troubled superstar. He was simply a father, holding his daughter, grateful for the gift of her presence. But the clock was ticking. On June 25th, 2009, less than 3 weeks before the debut performance of This Is It, Jackson died at age 50, having suffered cardiac arrest in his rented Los Angeles home. The conversations they had, the promises made, the confessions shared, it would all become infinitely more precious in the days to come. Michael had just returned from what would be his final rehearsal at the Staples Center. As the performer started to drift away, the promoter walked Jackson to his car. Michael put his arm around him. "Thank you for getting me this far," he told him in that whisper voice. "I can take it from here. I know I can do this." But his body told a different story. He was exhausted, depleted, running on fumes and determination. At almost 6 feet tall, Jackson reportedly weighed close to 130 pounds prior to his death. When he arrived home, the children were waiting. It was late, but they had refused to go to bed without seeing him. Prince stood in the doorway, watching his father's car pull into the driveway. Paris pressed her face against the window, counting the seconds until he walked through the door. Blanket had fallen asleep on the couch, clutching a stuffed animal his father had given him. Michael entered the house slowly, each step a visible effort. But when he saw his children, something shifted. Energy he didn't know he had suddenly materialized. He scooped Blanket up gently, careful not to wake him, and carried him toward the stairs. "How was rehearsal, Dad?" Prince asked, following close behind. "It was good, son. Really good. I think we're almost ready." Paris bounced alongside them. "Are you excited? For London?" Michael paused at the top of the stairs, looking back at his daughter. I'm excited to make you proud. All of you, that's all I want. To make you proud to be my children. Paris smiled. We're already proud, Daddy. We've always been proud. He tucked Blanket into bed first, then made his rounds to Prince and Paris. With each child, he lingered a moment longer than usual, kissed their foreheads, whispered words of love. It was as if some part of him knew, even if his conscious mind refused to accept it, that these moments were precious beyond measure. In a recording made weeks earlier, Jackson had spoken in a slow, slurred voice about leaving a performance legacy bigger than Elvis or the Beatles, and building a hospital for children. He envisioned the hospital would be big enough to aid 1 million children. That will be remembered more than my performances, he said. My performances will be up there helping my children and always be my dream. His children, always his children, even in his grandest visions, they were at the center. That night, Michael Jackson went to sleep, hoping for rest that wouldn't come. His doctor, Conrad Murray, administered the medications that were supposed to help him sleep. Murray admitted to police following Jackson's death that he had given the singer infusions of propofol in order to help the performer sleep. The next morning, everything changed. The children woke to chaos. Paramedics, sirens, their grandmother's sobs echoing through the halls. You know, I will wake up in the morning, and I won't be able to see my daddy, Paris cried. She cried and was very stark, and then she asked to see him. The children, Prince, Paris, and Blanket, wept when told the king of pop was dead. Murray told police that he hugged the children to comfort them. After they cried and cried and cried, then his daughter uttered a lot of words of unhappiness. She will live alone without her dad, and she didn't want to be an orphan. The confession, the apology, the promises made in that quiet room just weeks before, they were all that remained. The world mourned Michael Jackson as a superstar. The tributes poured in from every corner of the globe. Candlelight vigils, memorial concerts, magazine covers proclaiming the death of a legend. But for Prince, Paris, and Blanket, the loss was far more personal, far more devastating. They had lost their father, their protector, their best friend, the man who made them breakfast and played hide and seek and told them they could be anything they wanted to be. At the televised memorial on July 7th, 2009, then 11-year-old Paris concluded the service saying, I just wanted to say, ever since I was born, Daddy has been the best father you could ever imagine. Consoled by her aunts, uncles, and grandmothers, she continued, and I just wanted to say I love him so much, before she burst into tears. The words stunned the world. Here was a child, a little girl, standing before millions, speaking with more courage and love than most adults could muster. It was the ultimate testament to the father Michael had been. Not the headlines, not the scandals, the love. In the years that followed, the children would honor their promise. They remembered who their father truly was. At this point in our lives, it doesn't really feel like there's a hierarchy of I'm the older brother, Prince would later say. We're all siblings, and we're kind of all on that same level where my sister has her strengths, and my brother has his strengths where I'm not as strong in certain areas. They complement me in that way. They stayed together. A family, just as Michael had wanted. Any moment I get to spend with my siblings now, especially as we're getting older and our own lives are starting to kind of blossom and grow, Prince shared. Every moment that I get with them, any little family dinner, any little family outing, is really a special moment for me. The confession Michael had shared that night, his fears, his regrets, his apologies, had become a foundation, a touchstone they could return to whenever the world became too loud, whenever the questions became too painful. They knew the truth, and the truth was love. Paris would grow into a fierce advocate for her father's legacy. She became a singer herself, releasing her debut album Wilted in late 2020 to critical acclaim. In interviews, she spoke openly about her father's influence, about the love he gave, about the childhood memories that sustained her through the darkest times. Prince dedicated himself to philanthropy, carrying on his father's mission to help children around the world. I come from a very rich family history, and those are some big shoes to fill, he would say. I don't know if I ever could, but I wear it like a badge of honor. And Blanket, now known as BG, chose a quieter path. He has been making a name for himself as a producer and director in film. His 2024 short film Rochelle's won the Best Drama Award at the Santa Monica Film Festival. 3 children, 3 different paths, 1 unshakable bond. Years have passed since that night in the mansion on Carrollwood Drive. The world has changed. New stars have risen. Old stories have faded. But for Prince, Paris, and Blanket Jackson, the memory of their father remains as vivid as ever. They still carry the photograph Michael gave Prince that night, still replay his words in their minds during quiet moments, still feel his presence in the music that echoes through their lives. It's not like a voice in my head, but in a way it is Prince shared of getting advice from his dad. Michael Jackson's confession to his children was not about seeking forgiveness. It was about connection, about breaking down the walls that fame and fear had built, about being seen, truly seen, by the ones he loved most. He apologized for the things he couldn't control, for the chaos of his celebrity, for the masks that hid their faces, for the world that never let them be a normal family. But in that apology, he gave them something far more valuable than a perfect childhood. He gave them truth, vulnerability, the knowledge that even legends are human. And perhaps that was his greatest gift. Michael Jackson lived his life on the world's biggest stage. He danced beneath spotlights that illuminated continents. He sang songs that moved millions to tears. But his most important performance was never captured on camera. It was a night he sat on the floor of his living room, looked up at his 3 children, and said the words every parent struggles to speak. I'm sorry. I love you. And I need you to remember who I really am. The children never forgot. To this day, Prince, Paris, and Blanket stand together, a family forged in love and loss. They carry their father's legacy not as a burden, but as a gift. They have faced the world's scrutiny and emerged stronger. They have answered the critics with grace. And they have proven, beyond any doubt, that Michael Jackson's greatest achievement was not Thriller or the moonwalk or any of the accolades that adorned his walls. His greatest achievement was them. And somewhere in the silence between heartbeats, in the space where love transcends death, Michael Jackson is watching, smiling, proud, not of the king of pop, but of the father he became. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who loves Michael Jackson. Remember, even legends face battles unknown to the world. Subscribe, leave a like, and share this video with someone who loves Michael Jackson.